by how we're with children, we teach them how to be alone. For the times that we're not bodily with them, it's those special times that we are with them. So often now, it's technologies that are crutches, they're standing in. This actually is very relevant, that we're setting aside technology at those times, that we are prioritizing being bodily, personally together, is a way of actually establishing, fortifying a kind of interior sense of self, of who I am, of where I belong, of the people I stand in relation to, that gives the kind of character and personal standing to make you feel as though you're not alone. Hi, I'm John Cuddeback.
And I'm Sofia Cuddeback.
If you're wondering whether you can really be friends with your spouse
and raise children into responsible adults with whom you have a relationship,
and do what it takes to make a homestead, reconnecting with your body and the land wherever you live.
If you just want to think more about how to make a truly happy home in our trying times,
then The Intentional Household, a LifeCraft podcast, is for you. Join us. Wake up and bedtime rituals in the home. It's always great to be with my wife, Sofia. And today's topic is very concrete. Very often we're asked, can you please just share some more things, that very practical things that you do in your home? Maybe lighter on the principles, a little thicker on the applications. So we thought that this might be a nice thing for us to have a conversation about. And of course, we always enjoy discussing such things.
Yeah, it's funny, when you first suggested thinking about this together, it seemed like, well, I mean, those are kind of small details in the household. Is that getting too minute or too practical or too mundane? And then as I thought about it some more, I just thought, no, I think I've really heard people talking about the way you start the day really helps put you on a trajectory for a certain kind of experience during that day. And then likewise, how you end the day often sets you up for the kind of rest you're going to have during the night, which then affects how you feel when you wake up in the morning. So actually, bedtime and wake up rituals actually are pretty important in conditioning how we experience our whole day and our night.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we'll end up having conversations about actually much more peripheral things than this one. Although I understand why it did kind of seem minor. But maybe another nice thing about this one is it is kind of right there at hand to start to make some concrete resolutions about.
Yeah,
and be easy to remember.
I actually love thinking and talking about these because for some reason, the first thing that comes to my mind when we talk about wake up routine or bedtime routine, it just gives me a very, I don't know, for lack of a better expression, kind of cozy feeling of something that's actually kind of two special moments of the day that really contribute to a feeling of belonging. And maybe for me, it's also just kind of triggering memories of very precious times that we had in our household with our children, and also with one another and with our children together. So anyway, it conjures a lot of good feelings for me.
Good. Well, where do you think we should start?
Maybe before we talk about the practical details, which will be super fun to talk about, are there any philosophical principles that we should consider that would maybe kind of put us in mind of some kind of bigger umbrella under which these kind of practical details happen?
Philosophical principles? So you mean that have practical applications?
I was suspecting you were going to say
doubt it. Okay. Turn me loose on that one. I hope we get back to the concrete. We'll go off flying high up in the air. Well, actually, all right, let's see. Where might we want to go with that? I think there are. Of course there are. And of course, it's always rooted in an understanding of human nature. Any thinking about how to live the good life, any trying to think about the exercise of the great virtue of domestic prudence in the household, that great virtue the husband and wife want to work on together in ordering and crafting a good life, right? Everything always comes under that, arrange everything in view of the end, in view of deepening our relationships, deepening our character. So it's always nice as Christians, deepening our love for God and all others in that love for God. And of course, that's the natural fulfillment of good character, right? Supernatural charity, love, that kind of give form to and embrace everything in our life. So we're trying to prioritize always our relationships, and unto the relationships flourishing is that we live a certain kind of life, that we have a certain kind of character, that we prioritize certain kinds of goods. So we kind of begin with, well, what's going to be best, for the persons in the truest sense and our relationships. that's where it started, and then okay, it starts to get, and then there's always that more concrete principles. How about this one? We've had a separate discussion of the importance of imagination. And I think that's always something to bear in mind. I think we'll want to think about that very specifically. In both going to bed, I'll end up having a quotation from St. Thomas Aquinas on imagination and how you end the day.
Mm.
But I mean, that it will apply, I think, in a very similar way to kind of our imagination in the morning. That great principle of where our imagination is where our thoughts and heart will tend to be. So I think we can bear that in mind. How about also man as a sign maker? The importance, I love when Thomas Aquinas makes the point that any important kind of inner dispositions need to be embodied. They need to be shown through physical embodied actions. And so his example of that is praise of God. While the most important aspect of praise of God is something that happens interiorly, kind of in your intellect and your will, at the same time, we express that praise through bodily actions. And so all of those very important dispositions that we're trying to cultivate in ourselves, of course, our relationship is all about the dispositions we have towards one another. We're going to want to be expressing certain kinds of things through these bodily actions. Maybe just one other, and you can tell me how you think we're doing here. Man is a habit former. In other words, that we take on a character, we take on firmer interior dispositions by the practice of them. It's always good to remember. Dahl holds, and St. Thomas Aquinas certainly follows him. Every action that you do can be the beginning of a habit. In some sense, is the beginning of a habit. Habit in a kind of a rich sense of an interior disposition in the powers of your soul. So we're always thinking about that. What habits are we forming? I think that's great to have in mind as we think about, especially at these kind of key times of the day, what are the kind of concrete actions we're going to prioritize.
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds like those are three really excellent areas to be in to kind of organize and give us kind of a window through which to look at these practical things we're going to talk about. I actually, as you were enunciating these principles, it occurred to me that maybe when we first started talking about this, immediately in my mind, I had an image of wake up and bedtime routines vis-a-vis our children, especially when they were young. And as you were talking about the principles, it occurred to me that these things really apply to all human beings, not just to little children who are in a kind of very radical state of formation, but that all of us are, in a certain sense, in a continuing state of formation, and that the principles that you're talking about, it would seem that when we think about bedtime and wake up routines, continue to apply to all of us as adults. In our case, we're empty nesting, that our habits might
quite empty.
Not, no, we're empty nesting. That's why there was an ing at the end.
We're emptying out. Yes. Emptying.
Yes, exactly. The ing should be on the emptying. But in any case, just meaning the bulk of the kind of quorum of children has now that sorts our habits of waking up and going to bed are definitely of necessity to look a little different now,
but no less important.
And that even as when the time finally comes and our nest is empty, it seems to me that's going to stay an important question of how do we wake up? How do we start the day? What are the habits that we have that start the day? And likewise, what are the habits that we have as we end the day?
Amen. So, just as it was very important before we ever had children.
Right.
And even if we never had children.
Exactly.
Right? So I'm very glad that you pointed that out. It, by a special, generous divine plan, having children, young children especially, focuses us on things that then hopefully we realize we should be focusing on anyway. And we have that great new angle to consider our life of we are patterning something also. So there's something to bear in mind of what we're doing even in our bedroom, even if the children aren't seeing, is something that is absolutely affecting them. In some sense, they will be aware of. And it's just a whole beautiful further aspect.
Yeah. When we have when we're raising young children, often their kind of lack of formation or their empty slateness at the beginning of their life makes us say, what are we going to do? That we don't really necessarily do when we look at ourselves. And yet the question is just as important. It's just not as obvious when we're looking at ourselves as adults. So it's maybe kind of the good side of the splinter and the beam. The splinter in one's eye and the beam or the beam in one's own eye. But children give us the opportunity to reflect on something that maybe we don't think we need to reflect on for ourselves as adults, but that in fact we do need to.
Right. Well, Which shall we begin with? I have to admit, I'm inclined to start with night. Might
Mm,
seem counterintuitive to start with where we end, but then again, I think part of thinking about going to bed is it's very much kind of oriented towards how you get up. So in
that's
that
great.
sense, I'm inclined to go in that
I,
direction.
I was inclined to do it the other way, but I'm totally fine
I mean,
to
maybe
do
I
it with
should be
nighttime.
giving way here to you.
Not at all.
Um,
Let's start with nighttime
okay,
routines.
all right. Well, then let me go ahead and just say, at one point, Thomas Aquinas directly says something to bear in mind when you are getting ready to go to bed is the last things that you put into your imagination, or as it were, consciously, voluntarily focus your imagination on, will tend to carry over into the night, where, of course, as we know, we move into a kind of as we sleep, we're in an involuntary situation. They're not voluntary, fully human actions that we're doing in our sleep, but our imagination is still very much at work. And so his sense was that a very reasonable, good, salutary thing to do is kind of set up the imagination well. It's funny, it strikes me, it's almost like treat your imagination as a child. This will have never thought of this before. That will have an interesting carryover of right now we're starting with what we do for ourselves, but this is a really big thing then for for especially little children. They aren't really so much conscious, and in any case wouldn't know how to be prudent and intentional about what to focus their imagination on
Hmm.
as they end their day. So we will help them do that. So it's almost in a sense like we're focused on our own imagination almost as though it's a child,
Hmm.
because our imagination needs to be guided and directed
Hmm.
by our intellect and will. And so we kind of set that up, and then that will carry over into our time sleeping.
Can I draw you out on that a little bit?
Sure.
So why would that be important to focus our imagination in particular one way versus another? Is it something that is it important because it affects the way we sleep? Is it important because it affects the way we wake up the next morning? Or is it somehow a combination of the both? Like what would you say? Describe that a little bit to me. Like if you could even just do a little kind of example of a particular image that you are feeding yourself before you go to bed, how that might affect either your nighttime or you're waking
Mm-hmm.
up in the morning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And I'll just say right off the bat, the answer to the question was all of the above. And I'm trying to remember the text where does St. Thomas explicitly say, does he carry it all the way through and say it will tend to affect how you wake up? I almost feel like I recall that he did say that,
Mhm.
but one way or the other, I'd say there's almost more to distinguish. You might have just said, well, is this just about getting more restful sleep? Or is there kind of well, that itself is of course important. Is there more of a psychological, emotional, even spiritual element of for your kind of growth or enrichment there, not just for your good sleep?
Mhm.
Do you want to have this good imagination? And again, I'm going to say I think it's both. And the thing is, frankly, I would say from my own kind of trying to do this, there's no surefire thing here. Part of human life, I mean, sleep, the whole realm of sleep, there's something kind of mysterious about it. I mean,
Mhm.
that you have as part of God's plan, that you have this thing called rest, where, as it were, we set aside briefly this great drama of the human significance of every choice that we make,
Mhm.
and go into this kind of involuntary state is worth a lot of reflection in itself.
Mhm.
But I think there's a certain humility, there's a certain recognition that to some extent what happens in the night in any number of ways is somewhat beyond our control. Even just
Mhm.
how well we physically rest, we can eat well, we can not have drunk alcohol, or whatever it is that might have disturbed our sleep, or we learn that in our particular bodily constitution. So there's all that. We can do our best there. It still doesn't assure bodily how we're going to sleep.
Mhm.
Likewise, we can put certain things into our imagination. I think St. Thomas was certainly thinking it's good to almost, I want to say he didn't say this, but I think it's a reasonable extrapolation. Almost try to more jump start your dreams in a good direction with
Mhm.
good images than otherwise. And I think this much, I think I would say I have seen from experience. Haven't we all seen this? Where if you go to bed worrying about a particular thing or thinking
Yeah.
about a particular movie that you've seen, very often, particularly in a negative way, we might have these dreams then that are kind of a riff on what that was.
Yeah, and also waking up and that being your first thought in the morning.
Yes,
Certainly,
he does. He says that. I'm quite sure.
Well, I don't know if I read it in St. Thomas or if you told me about it in St. Thomas or I heard it from somewhere else, that the last thing you think about is the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning.
Or at least this will commonly be the case.
Yes, exactly. Kind of. Yeah. And it's interesting because I think that also when you have to be anesthetized, if you're going in for surgery or something like that, that was the case when our children were having wisdom teeth pulled, that the last thing they think about when they're going under is the first thing they think about when they come out. So it's, I wonder if to a certain extent, there's some kind of a mirror image there of what happens when we sleep, because sleeping is kind of, again, that it's really us, but in a certain sense, it's kind of not fully in control us. So
Right. No, exactly.
Yeah. I almost wonder if thinking about presenting an image to our mind as we're going to sleep, it kind of is a way of volitionally in our kind of will bringing forward something to the attention of our consciousness and almost presenting it, saying it to your consciousness, I'm going to take a rest now. My will is going to take a rest, but here, think about this or dwell on this while you sleep. So, I mean, it is a beautiful thing to think if you go to bed and you are reciting the 23rd Psalm or you have some little scrap of scripture that you're saying out loud or some more beautiful poetry, that subconsciously that would be the thing that your intellect is resting in while kind of your will is resting during the night. It's a beautiful thing to think that all night you could be resting in this beautiful image of the Lord being your shepherd.
No, exactly. Well, I was about to say, I think we should give some concrete images, and that was one of the ones I was going to give. Very often I go to spiritual images, not only, but something like, okay, picture the Lord. What a great practice. What a powerful practice it would be as we're about to fall off to sleep. Choose whatever it is. Is it an image of the Last Supper? Is it an image of our Lord holding a sheep? Is it of, of creation? I mean, it could be of, of the resurrection. It could be for any number of beautiful things where we just call it up in our imagination. That's in our power. And so we don't even so much say placing it in our imagination. We're calling it up. And then we can, as it were, direct our imagination to kind of build this in. And indeed, if we get kind of a habit of this, then it would be kind of easy each night to go back to maybe any of a set of kind of concrete ones that are in our normal store. Maybe we like to rotate a little bit. But in a similar way, I want to recommend how we could do this with children. And of course, part of it, we're especially prompt to do this when children are having trouble falling asleep or having night terrors, right? Any number of these things could be gone. But even just in the most normal circumstances, could say, well, I'm going to invite you to, to our child, imagine mommy holding you, especially if the child is scared, having trouble falling asleep. And even if not, just picture, I want you to picture me holding you. Oh, maybe I'll hold you right now. See how this feels. I'm going to, invite you to keep thinking about that. Or you could think about that this is actually like Jesus is holding you just like mama or just like daddy's holding you right now. Do you feel it? Well, actually, Jesus is holding you in the same way. We kind of guide their imagination and send them off.
Yeah. And little children are really amazing at capturing these images. It reminds me of just a quick anecdote of our older son when he was quite little, was laying in his bed at night and it was already dark and his eyes were closed. He was perfectly still on the bed and you walked in and you gently leaned down and you kissed him on the lips. And his eyes immediately popped open. He said, "Daddy, you ruined mommy's kiss." So he was just laying there with his eyes closed, remembering me kissing him. It's just so sweet that clearly he was trying to go to sleep and holding in his imagination my kissing him goodnight.
Any idea, I never would have
disturbed the
interrupted the experience. But
yeah. And very often our children would say things like, "Could you tell me the story of David again?" And so children often instinctively are reaching for that. So you addressed the issue of having images in the evening to prepare our imagination or our subconscious to kind of hold these things in our mind as our consciousness as we sleep, and then to wake up with those. But I think maybe another thing to bring up is certain habits of doing. So we had talked, okay, that's an important thing. It seems to me that it's important for us to have some kind of plan of habit of how we do this on a regular basis. And so do you have any thoughts or kind of suggestions as regards what would be kind of a routine? I mean, you use the word ritual, and I like that word ritual because it kind of conjures up a feeling of it being a repeated practice that has a certain kind of reverence or sacredness to it, or somehow connected to something very kind of almost like hush worthy trustworthy or something that's very precious, something to be cared for. And
Mhm.
so I like the idea of a bedtime ritual. What might that consist in, or what are kind of some possible ways that a ritual can be developed? Because it seems like a important aspect of the ritual is that it's a certain repeated thing that's
Absolutely.
connected to the notion of going to bed, and therefore it's done every time you go to bed.
And embodied, because our rituals will be embodied.
Okay, yeah.
So yes, absolutely. Then right now, this I think is the most memorable thing, and practical, concrete, and perhaps important. But in any case, certainly memorable and actionable thing that I'm going to say in this discussion of kneeling. End of the day, last bodily action, knees on the floor. In the morning, first bodily action or position, knees back onto the floor. I think it's a fabulous way of expressing bodily the entire orientation of our life. End of the day with our knees on the floor. And remove our knees from the floor, like straight lying down in the bed. When we get up in the morning, first thing, our knees slide out, back down onto the floor. We kneel in praise, in adoration, in supplication to God, saying, "You are first. You are the beginning, and you are the end." I really think that is a great way to bookend, and this is part of the gift of morning and night, is that getting up and going to bed, in a way, you can say our whole life is encompassed by it.
Yeah,
Our
bookended.
life is just days meaning including the night. There's nothing to our life in some sense but a sequence of days, and the beginning and end of the day, like in a natural design, is getting up in the morning and going to bed. So what we do there necessarily bookends everything. There's a bodily ritual. It's very easy to remember, and once it's a habit, it's very easy to maintain and have it be permanent.
Yeah, and I guess that really kind of man a sign maker and making this bodily sign, it keeps us present and alive to the fact that all of our life is in gratitude to our Creator. That we rely on Him in our day, and we thank Him at the end, and rely on Him for a quiet night rest.
Amen.
Too.
I think in my little list, I might have forgotten to say gratitude in kind of in adoration, in supplication, in praise, in gratitude slash in thanksgiving. Kneeling expresses this devotion, this fundamental disposition towards God. And again, regardless of what we feel like at the moment, that we give sign to that. That we choose to do that. What a wonderful way. It's always in our power to choose, regardless of what we feel like. And that sign that we give with our body is a way of showing that choice, of making that choice active. And I think it gives that choice a further power. It's like you invest the bodily movement, the bodily disposition, and you invest it with further power by the ongoing intention. I am kneeling down as I end my day. I'm kneeling down as I begin my day, because I want that to be the most expressive of who I am.
I love that. That's really, it kind of crystallizes this kind of intuition that I had. There's something kind of sacred about the bedtime. I love how it focuses us, kind of brings everything back to a point. If bedtime has this kind of almost this notion of sacredness, because it's again focusing back to that which is the most important after the day has been dissipated by the practical necessities of life. It's that moment of bringing back to a kind of focus. It occurs to me that there are bedtime rituals, like actions that are done regularly leading up to that kind of culminating moment of on our knees and then directly into bed, that it seems like it's appropriate that there be certain kind of actions that begin to prepare us for what is that culminating ending moment. And so even things that are very completely mundane or practical in nature would seem to be. So for example, okay, it's time to get on your jammies, put your clothing in the laundry hamper. Let's go brush your teeth. Okay, now it's time to, bedtime story or pray the rosary or whatever the sequence is. Those small actions that are purely practical. Now, of course, I mean, you do need your children to get into their jammies, and you do need them to brush their teeth or whatever. But it's almost like building a ramp toward kind of that moment. I think there would be something that's kind of shocking as human beings for us to go from the purely from the kind of the practical, the mundane, the task orientedness of the day to all of a sudden expecting us to have the kind of appropriate disposition of gratitude, reverence, respect, praise at the very end of the day, and this kind of focused pinpoint, and then just drop into bed. And so I
Yeah.
think there's a real kind of almost natural prudence about establishing some type of bedtime routine of physical actions that are beginning to signal to us we are approaching that time when
Yeah.
and I'll throw in there, I mean, that's kind of drawing an image of a family with very young children, but maybe as the children are getting older, or for us as adults, and not necessarily in reference to children, what are some other practical practices that are on the bodily level that help us kind of make that ramp
Yeah.
toward that focus that we need to have? And they could be things like no more internet use after X time, or now I'm going to turn off my phone and put it on
Sure.
airplane mode. And then I go do my, ablutions, as we jokingly call them, before we go to bed, our washings before bed. So, I think it's good for us to think about what habits we have during the day that make it hard for us to have that concentrated focus, that coming on our knees at the very last ritual. What are the things that dissipate that focus? And
Yeah.
so for us as adults, it's going to probably most likely involve some form of technology. So.
I think that's a great point. Can we focus in then on that kind of? How about to quote the title of I think a beloved book by many, 10 Minutes Till Bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
We really enjoy reading that book out
so
loud.
fun.
However, in just listening to you and thinking about it, maybe be a fun book to read, but not one to emulate. Because if you look at,
The
if you don't
chaos
know
at
the
the end.
story, and in the story, the parents, kind of a classic thing, well, we'll get the children ready by giving them a warning, 10 minutes, 9 minutes, and kind of do the countdown. And, and the child's just kind of going about his business, okay, using up all that last minute, those last minutes.
And what he fits in those last minutes.
It still comes down to then right at the end, this total anxious rush.
Chaos, yeah.
And is this the end of the world? Might not be the end of the world, but certainly not ideal. But how about a 10 minutes to bedtime that really it takes into account what you're saying right here? It's that how can we start to prepare, almost like a little more remote preparation and a little bit more proximate preparation. And can we just start to have an attitude? And again, this is something so much. This is just so striking me. We do it ourselves. We pass this on to our children. Doesn't this make sense? By and large, there'd be something weird about parenting in such a way that we teach our children to do things that we don't do ourselves.
Yeah, terrible.
Okay, sure, maybe it's certain things children need to do. If it were the case that brushing your teeth were only important for children, not important for adults, then okay, then you teach the children to, and you wouldn't do it yourself. I don't think there's very many things like that. Most of the things that we want to get them to do,
especially the most important things,
exactly, we want to be doing them ourselves. And so this can be a holistic approach of maybe even getting them ready for bed as part of getting ourselves ready for bed. But then we have our own little ramp up rituals. But it seems to me most of all that we be intentional and we come at it with that approach. That a big part practically of which is starting a little bit early.
Yeah, so there's time.
We often talk about that. We need to go upstairs a little bit before we want to actually be in bed, because you want to have that kind of ordered, peaceful progression. You want to be able to appropriately, put things away, tidy up, do the ablutions, but you're on that trajectory towards something in a sense sacred. There's something kind of sacred about the ending in the beginning, maybe because somehow in the ending and the beginning, everything else is contained in seed. And the truth is, human life is in some very important sense sacred, set apart. It's set apart for God. Our root convictions about who we are going to be expressed here. I think it's important, by the way. Already suggested, okay, the key memorable thing is, knees on the ground, last thing at the end of the day, first thing in the morning. It goes without saying then, and prayer. Because life should be bookended by prayer. And whatever it is, whatever those particular prayers are, for some people it's going to be more abbreviated. For some, there's going to be a little bit more room. Do you spend a little bit of time there? Our practice in the morning, in any case, is more brief kind of and short aspiration prayer as we go down on our knees, make a kind of mini offering of the day at that moment. Then we say a larger kind of morning offering, morning prayer later on, normally kind of together with the others in the household. But we'd like to get that, fundamental first kind of foundational prayer, if ever so brief, in connection with that first kneeling. And then, of course, we have our ritual. Part of the prayers that we say even though sometimes we start them as we're brushing our teeth, we end them by kneeling together there. So of course, how prayer fits in here is a beautiful and essential part of it, I think.
Can I go back just a little bit? Because we brought up the book 10 Minutes to Bedtime, which I really love this book in our home. It's dilapidated and completely have to throw it out and repurchased again very quickly. We absolutely love the book. One thing that it occurs to me in that book that made me go, oh, I think this is an important part of bedtime routine, especially with children, is that ideally the parent is present. So not that you can't say to your child, go brush your teeth, but that somehow when it's time to go to bed, it's not sending the child off to get ready for bed and I'll come and, say the end prayers, because it's the whole ramp up to going to sleep can be hard to do. It's going away from the active conscious part of the day into that part of the day which doesn't have that experience of consciousness. So especially for children, it can be kind of sad. What? I have to go to sleep now? I want to keep playing, or oh, that makes me a little bit sad, or I'm a little bit scared, or I feel a little bit alone. And so I think that part of the reason that chaos ensues in that book is the dad is sitting on the couch reading the newspaper, counting out loud, the
Good
ominous
point.
9 minutes, 8 minutes from behind the newspaper. And so, it's kind of funny and it provides a certain entertainment background to the book. But I think it's a little bit of a cautionary note for us as parents that we should always have this attitude. It's not that you set in motion certain things that have to be done for bedtime, and that's the bedtime routine. And everyone does that while I have, my extra time, whatever. I think it's important part of the children's experience of going toward bed that their parents are present to them. In whatever way that means. It doesn't mean you have to do you don't have to stand in the bathroom with them while they're brushing their teeth, but that you as the parent are saying, now is bedtime, which changes what you're doing in that moment, not just what the children are doing. I think that's important from the perspective of a family, a household context, that the children experience that they're not being sent away to do this alone. And then I'll just also share, prayer is so important. For us, a huge part of our bedtime was reading a book at bedtime. So everyone's dressed, clean, ready to go to bed. Okay, everybody gets on mommy or daddy's lap and we read a chapter, the chapter book we're reading, or we read 10 Minutes to Bedtime, or whatever it is. There was always some form of everyone convening and reading a book before bed. And then usually after that, we would pray the rosary, which also for us served kind of the storytelling purpose, because what we started doing when the children were quite young is describing the mystery that we were meditating on. And the children absolutely loved that part. So, sometimes the rosary is hard for children, but they loved it when we actually told them the mystery we were praying kind of in story form. So it's almost kind of, again, a gradation. Take care of the bodily needs, and then we move one step closer to the spiritual emotional needs by reading a book together. And then we go into prayer, but still kind of in the story form mode. And then the final end of the day offering on our knees, we do our, kind of the praying for each of the children by name, praying for grandparents and for any special intentions, et cetera. So it's kind of, there was this kind of practical gradation from the very mundane and the very bodily, then to that which is both bodily and spiritual, and then that which is more heavily weighted to the spiritual.
Yep. That makes total sense. I want to take kind of emphasize something in what you said that struck me. Of I might put it this way: bedtime and most of the things we say about bedtime apply in their own way to the wake up time. Bedtime and wake up time are special, unique time to be together. It's not a time for a person to be alone. And I just think we really ought to think about that. It's not just children. This says something very important about a marriage. There's so much that we could talk about. They're going to bed together. Sometimes someone's traveling. Sometimes someone has to stay up late because there's a lot of extra things to be done. But that's hard. And hopefully it's an anomaly. And sometimes there'll be stretches in life where there's certain things that are out of our control, but we're talking in principle here. And this is worth being intentional and thinking about and reflecting and examining our life. Are we doing what we reasonably can as spouses to be going to bed together? Waking up together is nice too. Not as essential, I think, as going to bed together, kind of and ending that day, regardless of issues of marital intimacy aside. It seems to me that have a fundamental practice that this is important, that we'll prioritize again within reason, without being scrupulous, without as though, well, this means that someone can't ever have had a special opportunity to go out and stay out late and and the other goes to bed, of course. But that we see by and large going to bed as a time to be with people and there's certainly something natural about that we see in children. That, it's not just something wrong with them. That, they have night terrors, or that they're just trying to stay up longer. We're made to be together, and young children need to be. Now they do need to have to be taught how to be alone at times. But there's a great line in Sherry Turkle's book on technology and conversation, reclaiming conversation. But there was something in there about by how we're with children, we teach them how to be alone. For the times that we're not bodily with them, it's those special times that we are with them. And of course, she's bringing that up because so often now it's technologies that are crutches and they're standing in, and there's so many young people and adults are turning to fill this void in their life. Well, this actually is very relevant, that we're setting aside technology at those times, that we are prioritizing being bodily, personally together, is the way of actually establishing, fortifying a kind of interior sense of self, of who I am, of where I belong, of the people I stand in relation to, that gives the kind of character and personal standing that will help them be able to resist the temptations of having to go to the distractions of various and sundry technologies to make you feel as though you're not alone.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's pretty amazing. It's how we're with that teaches them how to be alone. I like that.
So I think it's just worth making a little resolution. I just recognize now, as looking back and thinking about even our life now with one baby bird still in the nest, it's easier now where we don't have much of a ritual at nighttime to even just have that child just kind of kiss him goodnight. Okay, go ahead, go off, early teenager. But I try to do this, although just in saying this, I now resolved to do it more. Always go to his room. Always go to his room and go in and place my hand on his head, give him a blessing, tell him I love him, and say goodnight. Why would we ever stop doing that? Ever stop doing that with our children while they're with us in our home?
Yeah. I just remember when our two oldest girls were in their mid to upper teenage years. And in order to make enough room in the household, we finished a room in the basement, and we thought, oh, this will be great for the girls. They're teenagers. They'll want their little extra space. So we gave them this room in the basement downstairs. And I got a sense they weren't crazy about it. But after a while, when we were able to rearrange things so they were able to be upstairs, they said, yeah, we really didn't like being downstairs because you never came downstairs to say goodnight to us once we were in bed. So their experience was that small thing, going up the stairs, passing their bedroom after they had already gotten in bed, on my way up to my bed, saying, goodnight, dear, meant that much to them, that when they were in the basement, I wasn't passing their bedroom door when I was going to bed. So I didn't say goodnight, dear. And that made all the difference to them.
That brings us to the importance of that aspect of ritual, which will transition into saying good morning. Saying goodnight. How do we do it? I mean, these signs, these bodily signs, need to be invested with meaning, invested with power, that we kind of gather our intention and invest what we say, how we move, how we embrace, how we give a kiss with this loving affirmation, that we take a child's hand, look in the child's eye, or is the child already in bed and we're kind of leaning over? Good night, so-and-so. I love you. It seemed, there's a ritual. Good night, say the name, I love you. We have the practice of adding to that, rest with the angels.
And the child responds, and rise with the saints.
Which will bring us to morning in a moment. That's right. But
so it's nice to have something like that. That's a regular
and
already
rhythm. That harkens back to the imagination thing. Angels are a beautiful gift. And to invite someone to rest with them will tend to bring an image to the imagination that is a powerful one. And this isn't just some little trick. We should rest with the angels. The angels want to rest with us. And indeed, in some sense, I trust that they are. But it will be, as it were, even all the more if we invite them to, if we're aware of that and enter into that. Wow, this is so striking me. Are there other times in the day when we look at one another and say, I love you? Of course, we can add then the beautiful ritual of parents blessing their children. Our children love that. I use a little formula from the Psalms, which is the very beginning of Psalm 20, is a blessing. And so I've memorized that and I use that, but there's countless other ways it could be done, even if it's just God bless you and make the sign of the cross on their forehead. This obviously is a blessing. A very powerful reality. I'm sure by God's providence, its efficacy in calling down grace, but then also what it says to the person.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Should we go to the morning?
Yeah, let's go to the morning.
Really, so many of the same things we've already talked about. Knees on the floor first. We don't have to go into the kind of theological details of the importance of a morning offering, which again is such a great Christian tradition, and certainly we enshrine that and do that in a particular way. But there's so many different things. But I mean, after the kind of saying good morning to the Lord, a word of praise, offering up the day, a word of praise, a word of thanksgiving. What are those appropriate dispositions of prayer that can be ever so briefly expressed? And then there's turning to one another. If we're married, that giving our spouse a kiss, saying I love you, saying good morning. So much can be packed into that of if it's a hard time, and often life is a hard time. There can be that element of, here we go. We've got this. Let's do this together today. Once more into the breach.
Well, also speaking of blessings, we take it for granted. Good morning is just what people say in the morning. Good morning. Good morning. It actually is a blessing for the day.
Good point.
Have a good morning. So your words actually carry a blessing to them. And so my parents are Ukrainian, and we grew up in a Ukrainian speaking household, and it was completely second nature. I presume my parents taught us this, but that you said you got up in the morning, you said "добрий", which in Ukrainian means good day, literally. It was just second, and there were 10 of us in the families all morning, starting from very early. "Добрий день". It was just simply what children said, and the children always said it first to the parent, and the parent responded. And so I just remember when our children were quite young, of course, it was completely instinctive for me to do that because that's what I did when I was growing up. I realized that if we didn't explicitly teach our children to say good morning or say good morning to them, that's not a natural instinct. And it makes such a big difference, especially in the morning. People wake up feeling differently. Some people wake up groggy. Some people wake up sad. Some people wake up perky. But if everyone has the habit of saying good morning, even those who are kind of dragging in the morning, it orients them to the other person in the room, which is just so completely different. It's acknowledging their existence, that it's good that they exist. It's acknowledging that, like you said, we're going to do this together. So being in a room in the morning with someone who comes in who's kind of groggy, who just sits down to their breakfast and doesn't say anything is just so crushing.
It's life-sucking.
Yeah.
It's awful.
It's really terrible.
And I really think this is worth noting. I mean, in the view, we've had other conversations about the importance of manners, even just from the viewpoint of manners, that regardless of how we're feeling, first thing in the morning, life is about interfacing well with those around us, whoever they may be, but especially with those closest to us. And generally, when we're getting up in the morning, it's going to be with those we have some type of important relationship with, obviously, especially in the home, that we just inculcate in our children and make sure that we are real practitioners
that we do
ourselves
it also.
and try to invest them. This is the important things about ritual. Ritual can become dead in its repetition if it doesn't have heart in it. And so we need to be intentional about meaning what we say. Good morning, and renew our intention, renew our commitment. We mean what we say, and we say what we mean. And others, frankly, whether they learn that from us or not, or at least patterning it, and hopefully they would, but for our own sake too. This is the thing to do.
And I think it's really important that as you to say good morning to someone signals to them that you have seen them, and it gives them a kind of experience of, I have been seen and I'm considered worthy of that notice. But just kind of the same as in your conversation about sign maker, signs are a two-way street. They signal something to the person to whom we are signing it, but it also very important signals something to us. So it seems like a small thing. And how is it possible that now you're conscious of someone you wouldn't have been conscious of if you hadn't said that? But it does awaken in us an awareness of the person that we have spoken to. So it really is this important ritual in the morning that not only signals to others that they are good and worthy to be seen, but it reminds us that there is someone here who's worthy and good to be seen. And so it's very important both ways, for both the person who says it and for the person who hears it, I think.
And can we completely agree? Can we focus for another moment on the person who hears it? I'm going to go really big. I often go back in my mind to the moment our first child was born, or the first moment when any of our children were born. We're blessed to be able to do it in the home. And so we were able to welcome them into the home. I think especially of how you welcomed them, by how you looked into their eyes and you said words of love to them. In many ways, to me, that is a kind of embodiment of what a household is. A household is a place where we welcome, we tell people who they are by showing them how loved, how seen, loved, affirmed, and welcome among us they are. I truly, truly believe that it is very important. We can, through simple practices, we can call them rituals, but not to make it sound as though they have to be something high-flying. Very simple. We renew that every single morning of our children's life. It is so good that you are here.
Yeah.
Talk about a child feeling seen, affirmed, and alive. The chances this child will be happy and not lonely and not isolated, feel that he belongs, he knows his place at the beginning of each day without fanfare. It doesn't have to be overblown, but nonetheless in earnest and real way. Each of his parents, ideally, they'll both be around. If they're not, then the one who is speaks that message again, that we stop whatever we're doing. I mean, what an important thing. It's a simple thing, but we need to get the habit of that. Are our children getting up a little later and we're up earlier and now that child is coming? Boom. Or is it this way between spouses? One has slept in. Pause. Stand up. Go to the other person. Look at one another. I mean, this is not, we have time for this. It doesn't matter how busy we are. What we're talking about is
An
can be a
awareness.
difference of 15 seconds.
Yeah.
There's no time issue.
And it's developing the good habits that help us remember that which in principle we want to do. I mean, it's what we want. Like, yeah, I could say, of course I want my child to feel like I'm happy to see them in the morning. But it's sometimes we forget. It's normal. If we have a physical habit that we do regularly, it helps us remember. And I think it's a great opportunity to, anytime you say good morning to someone in the family, whether it's your child or your spouse or whoever's residing in the home with you, it's a way, when you say good morning, it's actually code for, or a different language for, I'm so happy to see you. Oh, I'm so happy you're here. And if we think of it that way, then if our words can carry something of that or remind us, oh yeah, I'm really happy you're here. We just say, good morning. That's not, you haven't changed what you're saying. It's not laborious, no extra time. No, I really want to tell you, you're very meaningful to me. This is a very meaningful moment. No, good morning. But we realize good morning means I'm so happy you're here.
It makes me think of the Disney movie Pollyanna that people kind of, make fun of.
Yeah.
The Pollyanna view, everything's so rosy. Life is good. Life is always better than we've yet realized, especially when we live in the truth of the amazing gifts that God has given us, the love that he calls us to live and rejoice in. And for us to try to make that our own and pass it on to those around us is these rituals, especially in the morning and the evening. They can be such a powerful way of conveying that. Again, talk about getting the day off on the right foot. What we've said to them, what we have said to ourselves in saying what we say to them is a reaffirmation of everything that we hold most dear. That's what's at stake at stake here.
Yeah.
So I think, when we think about, I myself, when we kind of brought this up, thought that we'd even, talk a little bit more about, well, should we have a set bedtime? Which is a good topic, which, by the way, I mean, I think our view is
that's a good idea.
A certain stability and
Yes,
dependability
exactly.
with an acceptable flexibility for those special times in life. Indeed, it can make the special times be more special, that, oh my goodness, I get to stay up tonight, right? So kind of the beauty of a stability, set bedtimes, even if it's hard, but again, you get in the habit. I think that's the type of thing we're preparing our children for what's going to be important in their parental life, that we ourselves, how often now do we need to kind of still have that discipline? It's almost like we need parents saying to us, get in bed, because we aren't good enough. Sometimes it's saying it to ourselves. Spouses can encourage one another on that. Time, a certain ritual of getting up in the morning at certain times. I'm thinking about, not putting off food too long, good nourishing food, starting with a glass of water. We're human. There are all those good bodily rituals that are part of what we do, getting properly hydrated, starting right off the bat, especially in the warmer months, right? Let that water soak in a little bit and then get some protein, especially for someone like me who doesn't have low blood sugar. Right? This is all part of it. But as you said earlier, that kind of gets woven into and very much colored by the more important aspect that's always the more important aspect in human life. that especially by the grace of God, that there is a beginning and an end of a day, that we have this repeated opportunity to grow in that particular way by reminding ourselves and all around us.
This is a little bit less, I mean, your observation is so rich and profound and kind of a bigger picture view. This feels a little bit mundane, but I wonder if this maybe will speak to people. Dinner is often talked about as the meal in which the family sits down and has conversation. There's very important bonding that happens, and the importance of the family meal has been documented in research and how important it is to have that time together. And dinner is a very special time because of the conversation that happens there. Very often breakfast doesn't have the room for conversation, and maybe because of different ages in the household, everyone's not even necessarily there together. However, I do feel like there's something very important about that morning meal, and not, again, it's often more fluid, but there's something about food that is nourishing and kind of with an eye toward this has to fortify us into the day. What can we do? So you have the sense of like thought has gone into the food that's offered for those who sit down for breakfast with an eye toward what can fortify you, nourish you for the day. I think that for our children in our home, having some kind of nourishing food at breakfast has been a very important part of their psychological and emotional experience of being cared for into the day. For years in the morning, it was hot oats with a little bit of maple syrup in it. Some of the kids grumbled or complained, my oats hurt my stomach, whatever. So of course you deal with it. But that became part of how we fortify ourselves for the day. It was always a little bit sad when breakfast was over. Okay, now we got to get to work. But I just feel like that was the way you eat food in the morning is actually an important kind of further comment of it's so good that you're here.
Yeah.
Or in any case, it can be, I think. And so to not just because often it's a transitory moment to something beyond it, that maybe sometimes we don't give it enough kind of thought or awareness. Again, not to put lots of time or effort or labor necessarily into breakfast, but that it can be a very special opportunity or moment in which to say in a furthering way, it is good that you're here.
That's a great point. And kind of bring together, the kind of wrap up the other rituals, kind of then come to that conclusion, and maybe a communal morning prayers is associated with breakfast. Food
morning
is always
offering all together.
We're rational animals. Food is always going to come in. Probably not so good to be not having a snack right before going to bed. So maybe not so much food on that end, but food is going to be integrated in there, and things kind of come together in a beautiful breakfast. Or again, it was simple, but that we invested
intentional
with that kind of intentionality. That's
exactly.
a great point.
Yeah.
Well, we could keep talking about it more, but I think that's a great place to stop. So thanks as always, dear, for spending some time having a conversation with me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for tuning in this episode of The Intentional Household. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating or review. If you have any topic requests, please send them to lifecraftgroup@gmail.com. For our Wednesday reflections, free courses, reading groups, and live events, please visit life-craft.org.